Welcome, everybody, to the Prime Time Podcast, hosted here on the MVG Nicky YouTube channel. My name is Nick, and I hope you guys are doing well whenever you are checking out the latest episode of the podcast that talks about all things in the world of TV, news reviews, commentaries, and more. Today we have episode number 19 for you guys. Hope you guys are doing well, like I said. Today we have a special one for you. This is going to be another one of those kind of ranked type podcasts that we've done recently. Just talking about a little bit of an overall view of the TV landscape here, similar to what we did a couple episodes ago when we took a look at each individual of the broadcast networks and we ranked them from top to bottom in specific genres. It's going to kind of follow that sort of format today. But instead of ranking just broadcast shows or just, one style of TV network, we're going to take a look at all of them today. That is stuff in the broadcast network sphere, the cable network sphere, and the streaming network sphere. And one aspect to it that I've always been very interested in discussing, especially on this show, I've wanted to do is take a look at the parent companies that own multiple outlets in those three categories and rank them based on the properties that they own. From worst to best there. So, for example, let's take a look at someone like Disney, just to give you an idea. You have them as a streaming provider with stuff like Disney Plus, of course. You have them in the broadcast sphere with ABC, and then you have plenty of cable channels they own, like National Geographic, just one off the top of my head there. So, kind of looking at all of the different outlets that they own and operate in and ranking them based on the quality and consistency of said channels. The other thing that some of these parent companies do are produce their own shows, especially if they have streaming service. So for a few of them, if it's applicable, I also have some shows that we can go over, and those can kind of be used as well to rank in these specific orders here. So with that in mind, go ahead and drop your ranks in the comments if you prefer. There are 16 of them to go through, so we have quite a bit here. And we're going to start off with what I assume is easily dead last here. I don't think this is even a competition here. The worst of all the major parent companies here in the US, ranking for different TV networks, is going to be Lionsgate here. Now, Lionsgate does definitely do a lot more in the world of movies and film. They're definitely one of the bigger movie studios out there. But with TV, they only operate one major network here, which is Starz, which is a premium cable network. Even then, they don't really have much to offer aside from like stuff like Party Down is probably their most well-known show. But even then, not that much to offer in comparison to other premium cable networks like Showtime or HBO or something like that. They also have produced a few shows with other companies that have been big, such as Mad Men, for example, probably their best well known. But solo, they've only produced one high profile series, which is Step Up High Water, which was their reboot or kind of sequel series to the Step Up film franchise, which premiered back in 2018 on YouTube Red there. Doesn't really make big of a splash, no pun intended there. Lionsgate, I think, like I said, easily dead last here. If you did include some of the other shows that they have produced, like Mad Men or Ghost or stuff like that, they would rank a little bit higher. But again, we're only looking at the solo productions that they've done on their own exclusively. And then, of course, the networks there. And like I said, Starz just not really that impressive of a lineup there. So Lionsgate comes in at number 16. Another one in that same batch that I think is pretty low, but does have double the amount of networks that Lionsgate has, is MGM. Another one of these big, movie studios. Don't really have the same hand in the operations on TV comparably, so they rank pretty low as well here. They have two major cable networks, Epix, another premium one, which again, compared to something like Showtime or HBO, doesn't really stack up against the competition there. And then their MGM movie channel, which is just a kind of library of their classic movies that they will showcase on TV sometimes there. I'm not really a movie guy much myself, so, it isn't that impressive to me. So I think this is another one that ranks pretty low here, just a very, very minimal amount to offer here. Not a lot of variety either, just not very impressive overall. Now, the next one here at number 14, a big leap up from these previous two, MGM and Lionsgate. This one is a little bit debatable where it goes. I could see some people definitely arguing that this one should be higher, but when you kind of break it down, I think that this one is a little bit one dimensional here. And the next rank is going to go to AMC. Now, of course, AMC as a network has been on the forefront of producing some of the top tier TV dramas of all time. You have, of course, Mad Men that came out back in 2007. That was their really first major hit. Then Breaking Bad in 2008 was, of course, massive as well. The Walking Dead in 2010. And then from there, lots of sequels, lots of spin-offs to The Walking Dead or Breaking Bad. You have stuff like Better Call Saul, of course. And even going into the 2020s here with stuff like Kevin Can Fuck Himself has been a huge hit for it as well. But in my opinion, AMC outside of that, they are very, very one-noted in the sense they don't really have a lot of variety in that regard. They don't do any comedies. They don't really do animation. They just stick to their format, and that's pretty much all they produce. And ever since the late 2000s, when they had a nice variety of dramas, they've pretty much put all their eggs into the Walking Dead basket at this point. And even hardcore Walking Dead fans like myself are getting a little tired of just the amount of shows they're producing that follow that same formula. It's just getting a little stale after a while. They do own and operate a bunch of other cable channels as well as a streaming service there. So some of those include BBC America, IFC, Sundance TV, and their streaming service Shudder, which is definitely catered towards movies and TV shows that are in the horror genre, which is nice if you're looking for that niche. But like I said, overall, this is just a very one-dimensional company. They don't really do a lot outside of the drama genre there, and to me, it's just not very impressive. So they're going to rank a little bit lower. But like I said, I could see how someone could debate them because in their heyday, AMC definitely was on top. But I think since then, in the last like 10 or so years, they've definitely slipped down as far as the variety is concerned. The next one up here is going to be part of a few of these big major companies, especially in the tech sphere, that own and operate one specific streaming network. And there's going to be a few of them in here that own, one major streaming channel in some case that's all they own, but they also operate a lot of their individual shows here. And of those kinds, in my opinion, the weakest of all of them thus far has been Apple with their streaming platform, Apple TV. Now, in my opinion, there are some good shows here. I'm not discrediting, completely their lineup just yet, but they are just far too new. They've only been around for like 2 or 3 years now. They do have a nice variety of shows. You can see on the right there are some of the original produced stuff they have. See Physical, Dickinson, Severance, The Morning Show, of course. I mean, they have some big name actors and some big name producers working for them, but they just haven't had the same time to really develop themselves or cement themselves yet. Give it a couple years and they definitely will, I think, be on top there. They're gaining, more and more traction each and every month there with new releases, but they just still need to work, a little bit more at just kind of giving themselves some time to develop and kind of mature gradually here. The other thing with Apple is it kind of comes off a little bit as like they have, a lot of money. They're valued at like $1 trillion. So fuck it. We're just going to make a streaming service just to make one without really putting in that same sort of effort the way that like Netflix or something would, where that was their first, they were really on the ground floor there. Apple just kind of coming in because they can, because they want to, not so much because they have a genuine passion for it as much as some of the other ones there. So that's going to hurt them a little bit in this rank as well. So for me, they come in at number 13 there. Following then, another one of those huge tech companies that decided to make a streaming service not that long ago that, again, hasn't had that much time to develop here would be YouTube with their platform YouTube Premium or YouTube Red or YouTube Originals. It's gone through a ton of different names. They've changed it a billion times at this point. But they're another one that only has really a few years under their belt and doesn't really have the same sort of immense library as some of these other streaming services. For me, the main thing that really separates them, which is really interesting, is they have two very different types of shows that they produce. You have shows that are very much so ingrained within the YouTube community, featuring YouTubers directly. So that could be stuff like Lies on Demand, Minefield. There's some other ones like Yai Time with Jack Douglas, of course, or something like Matt Pat's Game Lab, were some of the kind of first ones that they did way back in the day. So you have that sort of style, which is very obviously fitting for YouTube, featuring YouTubers in their own field, just getting to expand off of their original content that they've been known for potentially decades in some cases. Then the other side of it brings in this more mainstream appeal. You have, big name actors like Demi Lovato there doing her docu-series Dancing with the Devil, critically acclaimed. You have Ryan Hansen with his show Ryan Hansen Solves Crimes on television. You might know him from like Veronica Mars or A Million Little Things or something. You have Dallas and Robo, right? Big name actors on there like Kat Dennings, John Cena, Giancarlo Esposito, Stephen Root. I mean, lots of people on there. Weird City with Ed O'Neill, of course. So there's a lot of big names that have attached themselves to YouTube over time. But again, a lot of these just feel very gimmicky. They just don't really have that staying power the same way that some of the other networks have. And similar to Apple, they just haven't had enough time to develop themselves the same way that like a Netflix or a Hulu has by comparison. The last one in this sort of mini batch where, again, these big tech companies coming in and going into the streaming game here. At number 11, we have Facebook there with Facebook Watch. This is probably the least known of any of the networks or any of the streaming services that we're going to talk about today. But in their short time that they've only been around for maybe like 4 or 5 years or so, they have produced some of the most critically acclaimed and biggest shows in their space, such as The Real Bros of Simi Valley. I was doing some research on these shows just to get a viewpoint of how big some of these truly are. And The Real Bros of Simi Valley is one of the most critically acclaimed on IMDb with a 9.0 out of 10. It's one of the biggest sitcoms of all time on there, which is crazy. Definitely one of my favorites as well. I've seen through the first couple seasons there. You have Red Table Talk. That's probably their best known show, currently on its 4th or 5th season, I believe. That was one of the ones that they had as their launch shows that they had way back when they started, and that's been going strong ever since. And then with dramas, you have stuff like Sorry for Your Loss with Elizabeth Olsen, you might know from WandaVision there. That was one of Steph's favorites. She really enjoyed that show. So again, there's a nice variety here. There's definitely lots to offer if you're looking for that, but Facebook just does not have the same name recognition in the streaming world that some of their competitors do. They are a big name in tech, of course. They definitely have a lot of resources that they could pump into Facebook Watch if they wanted to. It just doesn't seem like that's something that they're really invested in quite yet. Because again, they're so new by comparison. So that's another thing that hurts them a little bit. So between those three, between Apple, YouTube, and Facebook there, kind of group them together. You could rearrange these orders depending on your personal taste there. But again, all of these just kind of newer, bigger tech companies that are coming in, trying their hand at streaming with mixed results there overall. Breaking into the top 10, the first one that we have to talk about is a childhood favorite of mine and one of the biggest broadcasters in the entire world there with PBS here. They own and operate 4 unique different stations here with PBS specifically. They're, obviously their original one. You have Create there, which is a lot of lifestyle type shows, a lot of cooking shows, and like gardening, home, improvement type shows. We watch a lot of those for the cooking type stuff. You have World, which is a lot of documentary stuff, and then PBS Kids, of course, which is a childhood favorite of me and so many others all over the world there. You have shows like Curious George, Cyber Chase, Arthur, Martha Speaks, Word Girl, Sesame Street, of course, cannot forget that. So PBS has had a massive, massive influence on TV as a whole. The main issue and why they're kind of in the middle of the pack here is because a lot of their shows are very hit or miss for me. Personally, there's probably only a few per each of these networks that I really come back to nowadays. With the real PBS, they've had some huge hit shows like Downton Abbey, for example. It's probably their best known show. Mercy Street I've talked about in the past, which was pretty good. But again, for the most part, just kind of a little more niche, a little bit catered to an older demographic than someone like me, of course, who's not really interested in the period piece dramas or stuff like that. And then World with documentaries, I usually don't watch any of that stuff because sometimes those can get very political, or they talk about certain subjects that just you're not really in the mood to watch when you just want to come home and relax. So again, a little bit more hit or miss in that regard. So PBS has done some very, very good things. They definitely have a nice variety to offer here compared to some of the earlier parent companies we talked about. But by comparison, again, a little more underwhelming in the fact that how many of the actual shows are you going to watch? Percentage wise, probably not going to be that high per any of their stations here. The final channel that we have to talk about here that only operates one streaming service here. After this, everything else has at least two major networks under their belt here, is going to be Netflix here. Now, of course, with any of these solo streaming service, Netflix is easily going to take the top spot over something like Apple or YouTube or Facebook here, because the amount of variety and huge hit shows that they've had, like Stranger Things, like Bridgerton, like Grace and Frankie, like Ozark, like Murderville, like Big Mouth, like The Witcher. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. Netflix has been on the leading ground floor for the past decade almost, I think. In the world of streaming, they were definitely the first to really implement it. They're still the biggest to this day as far as the amount of unique visitors they have and memberships that people have with Netflix. Just absolutely massive as far as the statistics that they hold in comparison to their competition. Quality wise, you can make an argument that they've definitely gone downhill a little bit. I would say for at least the past couple of years, ever since the rise of the Apples and Facebook Watch and even stuff like Disney Plus as well, that have really come in and shook things up in the streaming world. They've lost some ground, admittedly, but they still hold a reputation that I think is much higher than most of the other networks by comparison, and their legacy for sure will definitely propel them into the top 10 here. Following them, one of their closest competitors, the second biggest streaming service after Netflix here, owned by this tech giant here, Amazon, with Amazon Prime here. But in addition, you also have their other streaming service, a little bit smaller, but also very, very well known, IMDb TV, where you can watch a lot of huge hit shows for free, which is a massive, massive perk with IMDb there. As far as their huge hit shows go, some of the most popular of them, you see Transplant, Moment of Truth on IMDb, a great documentary series. You have Patriot, you have Invincible, you have The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel there, just to name a few of their biggest hits there. Great variety there. You have dramas, comedies, documentary, animation. They are all over the place there. Personally, I don't really watch that much of Amazon at all. I wouldn't say any of these shows really are for me personally, but I know a lot of people that absolutely love them, and they just continue to grow. They have been the fastest growing streaming service out there since they launched back in the mid 2010s there. And like I said, they are right behind Netflix as the second biggest as far as the amount of members they have and the amount of subscriptions they hold. So they could potentially overtake Netflix in the next couple of years here. That would be very interesting to see. The fact they also have IMDb there again, from this point on, everything is going to have at least two major channels behind them. That is certainly going to propel them as well there for some of the more niche stuff. And the fact that, like I said earlier, you have access to all that free content on IMDb, which is a major, major perk there. So Amazon safely here in the top 10, ranking at number 8. Following them, the next one, this is where we're going to start to get into some of the more traditional network broadcasting type of channels here, beginning with our first one here, which is going to be the Fox Corporation. Now, as far as the major 5 networks go, Fox has always been sort of more towards the bottom of the rank there in comparison to something like ABC or NBC by example here. But they do have a nice variety of stuff there to check out. So that's definitely going to be what kind of propels them up here into number 7. The other main thing with them is they have a clear division of stuff that's on network TV, stuff that's on streaming, and stuff that's on cable. The first one that we've seen so far that has all three components there put together into one massive company. So you have on network TV, you have Fox, and then you have My Network TV, which was their syndicated platform that's still around today in some affiliates there. The one here in Detroit that we watch, My Network TV, channel 20 sometimes, I'll check out. They hold stuff like Chicago Fire, they play SVU sometimes. They used to play The Walking Dead a lot, so some of my personal favorite shows for sure on there. But in their prime, they were definitely known for SmackDown. That was their biggest show back in the day when they launched in 2008 with SmackDown versus Raw. That was obviously huge back then. So that was definitely something that really put their name on the map. Then for streaming service, you have Tubi there, another one that gives you great free access to a ton of TV shows and movies there. And then for cable, their biggest two like kind of genres, if you will, cable news there with Fox News, and then their sports content, Fox Sports and Big Ten. For me, none of that is interesting at all to me. I'm not a sports guy and I don't really follow cable news at all, but I will give credit where credit is due and say as far as pure numbers go, they're putting up absolutely huge stats every single day. Fox News is easily the biggest of the three major news companies. Between them, MSNBC, and CNN, they are definitely at the top as far as viewership goes. Their sports lineup, this was actually something that Mike talked about not too long ago on his channel, that Fox does sports really well, especially stuff like football they'll do. So they have those, 24-hour sports channels there with like Fox Sports and stuff. So if you're a big, sports person, you follow a lot of it, then they are definitely going to be a name that you're going to want to remember there. So a nice variety overall, like I said. I think they are a little bit weaker overall as far as the just quantity of stuff. Six, main channels is a lot comparably to some of the other ones we've seen, but kind of dwindles in comparison to what we have in the top six here going forward. So not too bad overall, just kind of in the middle of the pack there. Nice variety is definitely their biggest plus here, but overall still not too shabby for the Fox Corporation. Next up here, coming in at number 6 here, their direct competitor with NBC Universal. Now, I've stated in the past that NBC is probably my personal favorite of all the networks. They're definitely between NBC and CBS is my, top preferred two channels on TV. So outside of that, what else do they offer? Because everyone knows NBC, how, giant they are with some of their biggest produced shows like the Law and Order shows or the Chicago shows at the moment. But what else do they offer that brings them up to the top 5 or the top 10 here rather? Well, they have a ton of cable networks here, especially for syndicated content such as USA, the Olympic Channel, Oxygen, MSNBC, CNBC. They're definitely big on the cable news stuff as well. Sci-Fi Channel, which has produced some big originals like Child's Play, Chucky in the last couple of years here. They also have some sports channels like Golf Channel they own. And then their streaming service is Peacock here, which is probably my favorite of all of the main streaming services just because NBC is such a big one that I watch so routinely. It definitely does need a little bit of a facelift in the sense that they don't have a ton of stuff that's acquired outside of just NBC related content there. So the library of stuff compared to like a Netflix or something is a little bit smaller, but I think they go quality over quantity. So I would definitely put them up high. But the reason why they just, rank below outside of the top 5 here is most of these networks, I'm going to be honest, I have never had any interest in watching. Don't really have much interest in golf. Don't really have much interest in the Olympics all that much anymore. So those two, right off the bat, you can get rid of. MSNBC, CNBC, like I said, don't really follow the news, cable news all that much. You can get rid of those. So it definitely kind of a smaller array of shows that I would actually be interested in checking out here. I'll definitely give them credit for having huge broadcast, a huge imprint in broadcast because NBC specifically is, I think, the top network at the moment. But as far as their supporting cast of channels here to kind of back them up, there's just not that much here that I think worthy, justifies a top 5 placement. That said, however, the next one here absolutely was a guaranteed top 5 entry here because the amount of huge hit cable networks they own is unmatched by any other of these parent companies, and that is going to be Discovery Incorporated here. If you have seen any one of these companies, then you definitely know Discovery. I guarantee you, based on the amount of huge cable networks they own and operate: Science Channel, Animal Planet, Discovery Channel, Cooking Channel, Oprah Winfrey Network, HGTV, TLC, Investigation Discovery, Travel Channel, and my favorite that definitely puts them ahead, Food Network here. I mean, I watch Food Network all the time. Absolutely a fan favorite there. And then they also have a streaming service that houses all of these networks and all of their libraries put together with Discovery Plus, which is another one that's absolutely massive right now, that's growing incredibly fast. I think last time I saw it was up to like 25 million members or something. So it's overtaken like Tubi, IMDb, Facebook. It's overtaken like all of those other big ones that we saw. Despite having more of a niche market covered here, definitely a lot of lifestyle type stuff. You're going to get your cooking stuff. You're going to get science, nature type documentaries there with like Animal Planet, for example. So maybe not everyone's cup of tea, but at least for me, because of the cooking specifically and a little bit of some of the other stuff as well, they are definitely a top 5 worthy company here to put up a lot of stuff on Food Network, especially. I mean, we recently just got Hulu as well, and so as part of our Hulu package, we get live cable, and I've really been going back and watching a bunch of these over and kind of reminiscing about some of the shows I used to watch back in the day. So definitely in some upcoming videos, we're going to talk about definitely some stuff on Food Network. I've been wanting to do a cooking show related video or something like that soon, so definitely be on the lookout for that. But Discovery, for me, easily a top 5 worthy brand, meaning that the last 4 here are going to be extremely competitive, because if there are 4 companies that are going to be beating out Discovery and stuff like NBC, then they definitely need some justification for why they rank so high. And I think our next one in the form of Sony here can do just that. Now, I will fully admit here that if we're just going off of the networks and the channels themselves, Sony is very, very, very high comparably to what they offer, because they only have 4 major networks they operate. They have Sony Movies, which is kind of like MGM we saw earlier, where it's just a collection of their movies. You have Get TV, which is a little local owned station with some syndicated content. GSN, which is probably my favorite of these, game shows, of course, they have on cable. And then their streaming service is Crunchyroll, which has a lot of anime and manga type stuff, which again is not really for me, but it has a pretty big audience there. However, in spite of all that, the amount of shows that Sony has produced over the years is unmatched. If it was just the shows, they would be at the top, no question about it, because they have some of the biggest shows in every single genre out there. For animation, you have stuff like Harold and the Purple Crayon, which was so impressive, even though it was only on for a single season. One of my personal favorites, one of Matt's personal favorites he introduced me to. Absolutely stunning stuff. Game shows, of course, because they own GSM, they have a lot of stake in that. They have stuff like Chain Reaction and the Newlywed Game, couple of my favorites. With comedies, you have stuff like The Goldbergs on ABC, just a heartwarming family sitcom there that always delivers tons of laughs there, and especially in the form of dramas there. They are one of the biggest, if not the biggest, producers of dramatic TV, with some of their standouts being Cobra Kai, The Night Shift, Better Call Saul, and their crowning achievement, Breaking Bad. My friends, Sony is just on top of the game when it comes to delivering action-packed, emotional moments in their shows. Easily one of the world's TV producing legends there. So balancing these two out, again, if it was just shows, they'd be on top. If it was just channels, they'd be definitely towards the bottom there. So kind of ranking them somewhere in the middle there at number 4, I think, is a safe bet here. They had the most extensive list of TV shows on their Wikipedia page that they produce and they operate in. And this is just scratching the surface there. If you want to go through the whole thing, be my guest, because they have produced just so much great content over the years. This is just a very, very small showcase of some of the best that they've been able to do. So they are easily another one that's guaranteed a top 5 legend, but comes short of these top 3 here. which in my opinion, even though I have it in this specific order, there is a great debate to have in any order for these last three. You could put my number three as your number one. You could have them, rearranged any way you want it, because every single one of these is top tier as far as the amount that they operate in for all three major categories: for cable, for broadcast, and for streaming. And for me personally, coming in taking the bronze medal here, kicking off this top three, is going to be Disney here. This is going to be a hard one for some people to accept, because Disney is, of course, one of the top ranked companies in the entire world for any industry. Their value is just insane. Like, can't even put into words how big, how much stuff they own, of course. But for me, the reason why they're a little bit lower than the first two that I have ranked here is just because some of this stuff just really isn't my cup of tea. One of their major ones there you see is ESPN, just not really a big sports guy, so that's going to lose some interest from me there. Disney Channel, I never watched it by comparison to stuff like Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, which these top two own. You'll see in a minute here. So that one's going to lose a little bit of ground for me. I think ABC definitely at one point was my favorite of all the major networks there, but has definitely kind of, stumbled a little bit in the last couple of years. Definitely some of the decisions they've made as far as the schedules that they've been putting up just haven't been very good. So they've definitely been losing some traction in that regard. But they definitely make it up for having two of the biggest streaming services behind stuff like Netflix and Amazon: Disney Plus and Hulu. Hulu is probably my number one, just as far as the amount of original stuff they've put out, and then also some other great cable stuff they have, like FX and by extension FXX, which is definitely a huge win for Disney there. FX, probably the most overlooked channel just in TV history, because the amount of quality stuff they had that they don't get the recognition for is just unbelievable. So many great dramas on there, and so many big dramas like The Americans. You have American Crime Story, American Horror Story, of course. Stuff like Sons of Anarchy and Mayans MC, of course, by extension. By comedies, you have Atlanta on there, Dave on there, You're the Worst. What's another one? Trying to think. There's so much good stuff. It's hard to remember it all, but yeah, definitely FX is like just absolutely monstrous as far as the amount of stuff that they've been putting out over the last few years. You have stuff like Freeform as well. That was formerly ABC Family. They did their thing back in the day. They had a couple of decent shows. Young and Hungry is probably one of my favorites on there. Grownish, of course, the spinoff of Blackish was pretty good. And then National Geographic, that's definitely going to be a little more niche, like I said, but overall pretty solid as well. A&E, you got the documentary stuff in there, so they definitely check a lot of boxes here. They got a little bit of everything wrapped up in the Disney family of channels and networks here. But like I said, they come a little bit short to these last two that are just the most competitive that I have ever seen in this category here. Starting off with number two, we have Paramount here. They are definitely going to be well known for having CBS, which, like I said earlier, next to NBC is probably my favorite of all of the major five broadcasters there. They also had a little bit of stake in the CW as well, which is another five. Definitely, I would make an argument that their streaming platform, Paramount Plus, is probably pretty weak by comparison to most of these other ones. A lot of their original shows are extremely niche, or just, don't really serve a mainstream audience. Their back catalog of stuff just isn't really that interesting to most people, unfortunately, and they just don't really have a lot of ground that they cover with the streaming sort of category there. But they definitely make it up with their cable lineup here, which has TV Land, BET, Comedy Central, Showtime for premium cable. You have MTV and VH1 for the music type stuff, CMT as well for music, and then Nickelodeon, my favorite of all the kids networks, so that definitely had to be on here. I forgot to mention earlier UPN as well, formerly another one of the major broadcasters that they used to own and operate before that closed down, of course. But yeah, Paramount, their variety here is top tier. Their lineup here is top tier. I mean, between CBS, the CW, Nickelodeon, and Showtime, I would say, are definitely their top four there. Showtime, of course, you have those great dramas like Dexter on there, a fan favorite. So that's definitely a big win for Paramount there. And then Nickelodeon, like I said, I mean, you could just have an entire video here just reminiscing and talking about the nostalgia for Nickelodeon for me. Watched that stuff endlessly when I was a kid. So definitely more than like Disney Channel or Cartoon Network or something like that. So that's definitely going to raise them up here, putting them safely as number two, coming just a hair short to my number one parent company out there for TV, which is going to be Warner Media here. Now, as far as broadcast, the only thing that they have currently is half the stake in the CW, which is not that impressive, admittedly. They also used to operate the WB there, kind of similar to UPN before those both closed down and merged as the CW. So that's why Paramount and Warner both have a stake there. So that's the only thing they operate on a broadcast TV. So not that impressive. What about their cable lineup here? Absolutely gigantic here. You have Adult Swim and, of course, Cartoon Network by extension. You have CNN there, which for me is probably the most preferred of the three major cable news, even though I don't really watch any of them. If I had to pick one, I'd say CNN is probably the most, balanced and the least, biased in that regard. And they also do pretty well in ratings. They're definitely not like Fox News level, but they do, pretty consistently. TNT, which has some really good dramas on there. True TV, which is one of my favorites with stuff like Impractical Jokers, Adam Ruins Everything. They host the March Madness games right now. So if you're a basketball fan, of course, True TV, definitely essential to have. You have TBS on there, which has a lot of great syndicated sitcoms like The Big Bang Theory and Friends and Two and a Half Men. I've seen they play just a lot of the classic 2000s sitcoms there. Boomerang, another great kids channel. And then what definitely sets them above the other major parent companies here is their own and operation of HBO as a premium cable, as well as Cinemax, very underrated premium cable, and their flagship streaming service, HBO Max here. They definitely have, without question, the best archive lineup of any of the major streaming service. As far as originals go, they do have a very strong contender there with great shows like The Flight Attendant is probably one of my favorites. And they've definitely been expanding off of that. I know Peacemaker is huge right now for superhero stuff, but it's really the archive lineup is what really puts them over the edge because you get access to all of this stuff. So everything else that you see on here from Cartoon Network, from CNN, from TNT to TBS, all of that is Warner owned. So all of that's going right on HBO Max. Plus, of course, all of the archive from HBO itself, which, I mean, is absolutely gigantic here. The Sopranos, The Wire, Veep, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry Sanders Show. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on of how quality HBO has been for 2 decades now. In addition, HBO Max also has some great music-related documentaries, which is, like we said earlier with like MTV and stuff, they don't really do music much anymore. So if you want music content, it's kind of hard to find it. But HBO Max has some great ones there. You have coverage of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony, which is something that me and my family look forward to all the time there. So HBO and Warner Media as a whole just gives you so much stuff here that you can look on for decades here. There's just so much great content here from any single category, any age that you're looking for, any type of genre that you want. You can find it here, whether it's sports, news, stuff for the kids, comedies, dramas. I mean, they have it all here. So for me, without question, Warner Media is going up at the number 1 slot. A very tough fight against Paramount and Disney there as well. Like I said, you could definitely make the argument, but for me, because of HBO, that's really their golden ticket there to claim the number 1 spot on this rank. So there you have it, folks. That is my list of all 16 major parent companies here and the networks that they own and operate. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below, and if you would like to share your list, I'd be happy to respond and read it for you, see what I think of your opinion. Of course, we can have a nice discussion there. Thanks for watching this episode of the Primetime Podcast, and have a great rest of your day.